Hello, hello, hello. I'm Carltaze Ransom coming to you with what will be episode 8 of the C Note, waiting for my very special guest, Mr. Eddie Myles Jr. to join me. Um, yeah. So come on up in here in the room. Hopefully some of you will join us any second now. Again, I'm waiting for Mr. Eddie Myles Jr. so we can get episode 8 rolling. I'm looking for him to come on. Hopefully he'll pop up in here any second now. Yeah, I don't see anybody in here yet, so I'm basically talking to myself. Yeah, um, waiting for him to come in. I'm ready to do this thing. Hey, where is he? Waiting for him to come on in. Wow. Where are you, sir? Come on up in the room. There he is. I think he's right there. All right. Do you hear me? All right. Here we go. Right. Should be coming up in here any second. Yeah. Hey,
Hey, how
how
you
are
doing? How are
you?
you?
I'm
I'm
great.
great.
To see you
To see
nice
you
and
nice and
comfortable on the
comfortable
couch.
on the couch. Yeah.
Okay, cool, cool,
Cool,
cool.
cool.
Well, don't
Well,
don't be
don't be
tripping when I
tripping
do my
when I
little
do my little
spiel.
spiel.
I hear an
I
echo
hear an
right
echo
now.
right now.
Do you
Oh,
hear
is
that
it? Do you hear
echo?
the echo? I don't hear an echo, but it might be because I have. Hold on a second. Let me turn the volume down.
Okay.
Okay. Hold on 1 second. Is it echoing now?
Um, Let me see. No, wait a minute. Not now.
Okay.
Not now. It's not. It was first. Well, don't get along by my little spiel that I do at the beginning of each episode. Um, you know, because I don't know if you noticed on the logo, I hear it a little bit again. Now I just heard it again, but you don't hear it.
No.
Okay, it's just on my end. But what the hell is that? Well, we're on episode 8 of the C Note, where we keep it 100 and the real recognize real. And we also see those fake ass folk out there too. But I have with me today one of the real ones, definitely one of the real ones, Mr. Eddie Myles Jr. He is an advertising and marketing industry professional. Uh, he has worked on global campaign ads with clients on TV, print, and media, digital media. And you have experience in journalism and law. And also, I still hear that damn echo. That's what
Yeah, I don't hear
also,
anything. It sounds normal.
it sounds normal to you. It's just me. It just went away. Okay, cool. All right. And you also are community based with Pan Africanism, um, dealing with the political front, educational, and organization. Right.
That's true.
Cool. And I see you have a very impressive long resume here and so forth. But before we get to the heavy stuff, we don't want to go to them get hard on them just yet. We're gonna go to some light stuff. You're a well-rounded brother, so you are into cooking, right?
I
From
am.
a Pan
I
African
am.
perspective. Well, first of all, I know what Pan Africanism is, but um, please explain to the guests what it is to you.
I mean, Pan-Africanism is um, the idea that throughout the diaspora, Black people have a connection that is inherent and integral, but also from a political standpoint, that it is an important point of unity for us
Hmm.
to convene around and to pursue outcomes based on our shared heritage. That throughout the diaspora, whether we are Black Americans or Black Jamaicans or you know continental Africans from any of the African countries in the motherland, that our interests are aligned with one another because we are all Black people throughout the diaspora. You know, that pan
Yeah,
meaning many.
that's why you were drawn to the playwright contest that I came up with when you wanted to share it, the African flavors, diversity within Black Playwright Contest,
Definitely.
because the logo for that, it has different parts of the African diaspora listed. So I'm about that as well.
Yes.
Um, it haven't been easy trying to find playwrights to write for that because I have certain rules where I want us to kind of write as though I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I want us to kind of write as though Caucasians don't exist. Now, the reason why I say that is because when we add them in our stories, they normally take over the story. Everything is focused on them. So I want these plays to be written in such a way that it focuses on us and showing us in a different light, showing us actually loving on each other. I mean, everything is not going to be perfect, of course, but some of the plays can have some issues within them, but as long as there's some solution at the end that we work out together, you know. But I wanted to talk to you about the fact that you are a cook, a great cook, but you cook from an African perspective. So please tell us
Yeah,
about that.
I actually I have a YouTube channel. I've got, I don't know, maybe 12 or 15 or so videos that I've shot so far. Called the Pan African Family Cooking
Mhm.
Channel, and the I've always been into cooking because I'm really really into eating. um, but what prompted me to start that Instagram and that YouTube feed
Right.
was because I um, I have lived on both the East Coast and the West Coast, and I've traveled
Hmm.
pretty extensively in the past
Yes.
for work and things like that. So I've been a few places, and I spent a lot of time eating out at some really really great restaurants over the course of my career. And one of the things that I realized was that I just had a knack, I had a talent for cooking. I enjoyed
Hmm.
it, and I had sort of a knack for doing it. And I would take pictures of things that I would cook, just like everybody likes to take food porn pics. But for me, it was important to connect that idea to something that would serve the interests or the needs of our community. So for me, it was about taking the food that I was preparing, the things that I like to eat, and not even necessarily things that were traditionally African, but
Hmm.
looking at it from the perspective of people in the diaspora that I was connected to, people in Harlem, where I was born, where
Right.
I've lived for many years, for people who were not wealthy, Black people who might live in food deserts, Black people who might be experiencing food insecurity, Black people for whom food has been weaponized against us in many ways,
Yes.
and trying to give tips about how to use food as a form of resistance. And
Okay.
sometimes that
Wow.
took the form of discussing ingredients, like talking about the connection that coffee has to Africa and its health
Right.
benefits and things like that. I have an episode where I talk about making a vegan ice cream that's
Wow.
made with
Okay.
coffee and bananas and things like that. So looking for ways to use everyday food items in cost-effective ways, but
Yes.
ways that still feel special and feel important and feel significant, even though
Hmm.
we sometimes get sold this idea that healthy eating or vegan eating, and not everything that I cook is vegan. I'm not a vegan,
No,
although I
I
have
know.
been. But the idea that these sorts of sustainable lifestyles and food
Yes.
choices are very, very white. and sort of breaking
Right.
that connection and making sure that our people understand that not only do we have a right to healthy eating and tasteful eating and food that looks
Mhm.
really really pretty and that we can be excited to eat, but
Yes.
that in fact our history as environmental stewards, as ecological stewards, means that healthy eating and these sorts of things and responsible agro environmentalism are part of our culture. It comes from us. So it's not
Yes.
about the Greta Thunbergs of the world being the face of green living and saving the planet, but it's about connecting us back to our roots. And food is one of the most important cultural mediums. It's one of the most effective ways that culture is transmitted is through food.
Right.
And so just using that as the vehicle was sort of the inspiration behind my making food videos.
Well, we all know that most things started with us, as well as all genres of music, including classical music.
Right.
We created that too. And so you also work on building homes as well,
Well,
or
I
or you do
actually
some.
I grew up. My father was a contractor growing up. When we moved out of Harlem to the suburbs, my dad started his own business, and so he got into contracting. So growing up, I was on construction sites. Like my first job that I worked summers to get my
Okay.
first pair of Jordans, back in
Yeah.
the day, was working on construction sites with my dad.
Yeah.
And I'm one of five children. Four of us are boys. I have one sister, but all of the boys, it was sort of like one of our rites of passage was getting to go on construction sites with
Right.
my
Yeah. You
dad
all out there
as we got
working.
old,
Right.
as we got old enough. So I've always been comfortable around those sorts of things, but my personal interest, just artistically, has been more about interior design and art. I spent a lot of time working in the arts. I was a graphic artist many, many
Okay.
years ago. I spent time working at the Smithsonian. So art, the museum sciences and those sorts of things have always been important to me. And just understanding the connection to our domicile and the places and the spaces that we live in, and the importance
Hmm.
of treating them with respect from a design standpoint has also been really really important to me.
Yes.
I get that probably mostly from my mom. At any
Mhm.
significant stage of anyone in the family's life, the family sort of convenes, whether it's someone's first
Yes.
apartment or someone's having a baby. You come in and you make sure that their place is
Right.
properly nested. So I've been doing that for lots of years in my own personal space. I have this weird rule: every time I move, I give my furniture to someone else in the family, and I start all over and refurnish and sort of reinvent my living space. And so I've taken that idea and just run with it. And in fact, on my YouTube channel, there's some videos just about the ways to make your living space feel very curated and very connected to who you are, and from a design standpoint. And the thing about that, the food or any sort of cultural thing that I'm interested in, which I think feeds into the discussion that we want to have today about representation in media, is that we sometimes get convinced that these ideas are unrelated to our resistance against white supremacy, but they're not. You know, the fact that
Everything is
Black kids,
everything is very intentional.
exactly, connecting the way that we choose to design our spaces and the environments that we choose to live in, and
Hmm.
putting our personal taste into them, but also making sure that we connect those things to the Black experience, even at home, is very, very important. So the ways that I like to design spaces and talk about even interior design is very, very connected to the idea of things like living with Black art, living with research materials and books as part of your living space, and not some sort of library in a closet somewhere, but part of
Hmm.
the living space. I live with my brother and his two children, my niece and nephew, and
Well,
they're
somebody spoke to you on here. They say, "Hi, Uncle Eddie."
that if that yeah that's my niece. That's my niece
Oh,
who
cool.
um who
Hey, niece.
yeah.
Yeah.
So she knows what I'm talking about, but making sure that they're connected to the artifacts of the Black experience in the home
Mhm.
is really what that's about.
Okay, cool. So, when you went to school for marketing, because that's one of the things we're going to be talking about.
Yeah,
And we
I
all
went
know
to
that.
school. I went
Uh,
to school as an adult for
right.
business and marketing. Yeah.
Okay. So, what is one of the first things they tell you in a marketing class?
One of the first things you learn are about people, people, place, and position. It's basically the three P's that talk about how to look at marketing from an experiential standpoint about where you're going to place things, the position that you are going to be in the market, how you're going to segment and hone in on the market,
Right.
and what place you're going to utilize to bring your product or service to market. It's all marketing is a very intentional behavioral science.
Oh, I know it's very intentional. So you've done ads all over the world, and what type of ads have you worked on?
I've worked across the spectrum. Have worked mostly in an ad agency environment, very, very large, sort of like the
Hmm.
Mad Men kind of agencies that people sort of think about when you think about TV,
Yes.
to very small creative boutiques. I've worked on projects for big telecom companies. I've worked on fashion brands. I've worked on pharmaceutical advertising, a real broad range stuff with celebrity spokespeople, things that are just digital only, stuff in other countries. So I've gotten to work on and have experience across a range of types of advertising instruments.
Now, have any of those ads been specifically targeting our people that you worked on?
What's
And
interesting about the way that advertising and advertising is it's just one. People often mistake advertising for marketing as if they are interchangeable, which they're not.
Mhm.
Advertising is simply one tool that marketing uses.
Right.
As it relates to advertising and the projects that I've worked on, what's interesting is that I have worked on lots of projects that have um, excluded Black people as the target.
Hmm.
Um,
Of
I've
course.
worked on some that were specific, that elements of or arms of the campaign
Right.
focused and targeted Black people. Um, Advertising is, like I mentioned before, it's very, very intentional. And in the projects that I've worked on, what has happened more often than not is that you get a behind the scenes look at a lot of the sort of very built-in racism that goes along with
Mm.
the communication of projects to the consumer, to the public.
Like
Um,
like those pot pie commercials,
I'm sorry.
like those pot pie chicken commercials
I,
where they insert that.
I never worked on those, but
No, I know you didn't work with that, but I'm saying like the way they advertise that, like putting that black woman up there, like she's the one who is running the place, to draw black people in to buy that
oh,
chicken.
of course. I mean, that's called that's mirror advertising. So
Hmm.
when you are trying to reach a target, mirroring them with the people that you put as your spokesperson or in front of them. You mirror people based on race. You mirror people based on aspirational class status. You mirror people based on age, demographic, lots of different ways. But sure, that's a primary example of the way that works. And the
So,
same
so,
thing happens on the TV shows that ads run here in between.
uh, so what did you think about all that craziness, that foolishness with that Popeye's chicken sandwich that was going on back in um 2018 into 2019?
I mean,
Uh,
I think that the I think that the
I've never
Popeye
had it, by the
sandwich.
way. I've never gotten that. I've never went to get one of those sandwiches. I've never
Um,
bothered to get it.
I recently had that sandwich. Maybe in the last couple of weeks,
Really?
I had that sandwich, and I mean, it certainly wasn't worth waiting online for.
Or dying
In
for?
my personal opinion. But I think that from a
Right.
marketing standpoint, I think that what I think that what we learn from something
Hmm.
like that is the vulnerability of marginalized communities. The reason those kinds of ads work as well as they do, or any of those kinds of communications, it doesn't just have to be advertising instruments, but the
Hmm.
reason in the case of Popeyes, first and foremost, that those things are so successful is because when a community, a segment of the society is starved for attention or starved for representation, speaking to them is very, very powerful.
Right.
And so when you starve people from attention and then you give it to them, there tends to be an overcorrection in the response.
Okay. Cool. I mean, I saw people going wild over this sandwich, and some, I don't know if you recall or not, but somebody actually died
Yeah.
uh, because someone felt as though they were being rooted in line to get that sandwich, and they killed the person, which is that's just crazy,
I mean,
crazy to me.
the same
But,
thing that happens with, with sneaker releases.
oh yeah.
It is a reflection of the insanity of consumerism, right?
Hmm.
But again, it's also a reflection of how easily people can be manipulated um, through the idea of representation.
Right. Now,
Those people that would do something like kill someone online over a chicken sandwich, they do that because on some level they believe that that brand is speaking specifically to them and for them.
okay. Wow. I just never understood all that, but I understand what you're saying. Now, as you know, there has been an agenda against Black love, Black representation, and whether it be Black heterosexual love, Black singing and loving love, or whatever, there's an agenda against Black people being together. And I've noticed that lately in a lot of advertisements and a lot of different commercials and so forth. Like even with H&M. If I'm not mistaken, H&M is the company who had that controversy a couple of years back with that little black boy on the shirt with the coolest monkey in the jungle or some shit
Yep.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't know if you've seen their latest commercial where and I know it's all very intentional because they found a beautiful dark skinned brother with locks in his hair. All of that's intentional. And they put him with a white woman, uh, the palest white woman they could find. I mean, almost the palest white woman they could find, the blondest, palest white woman they could find. And they have this beautiful dark skinned man kissing her.
Mm-hmm.
Then they go to another scene in the same commercial, and they show a black woman cuddled up in bed with a white man. And if I'm not mistaken, they do show a white woman and a white man together in this commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Then towards the end of the commercial, they show the same dark skinned brother again, and he's holding this baby. And the baby is like really, really pale with really light eyes, don't look anything like him. And that kind of thing just bothers me because um I don't have anything against anybody. But today with a lot of these celebrities and so forth, a lot of these black celebrities are having children that don't look anything like them. They're like um, whiting out. They're whiting out the future branches of their family tree. Like Grace Jones, for instance. Grace Jones had a son with a Caucasian man, and he grew up, and you can still see the melanin in him. He looks like a light-skinned black man, but he got with a white woman, and so now Grace Jones' grandchild just looks completely Caucasian, and that's been going on a lot. So, what do you think about this whole thing with how they're trying to push the whole interracial thing and not show as many black people together in commercials and so forth? Yeah.
I mean, I think that at its core, you have to you have to look at it from the perspective of the way media has always operated, right, and who its enemies
Hmm.
have been. I think that without question, white supremacy has targeted and has been against heterosexual black men.
Hmm.
I think that when you look at commercials, and definitely, I would say that since probably around 2014, 15 is probably when you saw the biggest uptick. There was a Cheerios commercial that got a lot of flack where the husband was white, the little girl was putting Cheerios on the dad because she wanted to like protect his heart because Cheerios are heart healthy. I actually worked at the agency that made that commercial. I didn't work
Hmm.
on that spot. It wasn't my account. And the mother was black. The little girl was clearly a mixed race child.
Right.
And the what you heard with the story, the media, the press around that ad talked about the negative response, the racism about it being a mixed race couple. There was a lot of hate that people, and the idea was it was these racist, what would eventually become Trump supporter type people
Right.
who were against interracial relationships, because that's the way that America has always posited the idea of miscegenation or interracial relationships, as if it is a black issue, and as
Hmm.
if it is somehow an issue that if you are against it, you must be this sort of like redneck, backwards white person.
Right.
But the
Right.
reality of it is, interracial relationships aren't a black issue.
Right.
You know, the loving decision had nothing to do with black people. It was a white man who wanted to marry this person that he was supposedly in love with. It was about a white man wanting more of the full compliments of white privilege that he felt he wasn't getting.
Right.
That's what interracial relationships always have been about.
Right. Mhm.
So the idea that that somehow black people have a dog in the race of marrying white people is is pretty silly. But media wants for that representation to be there because that helps foster the idea that there is something wrong with black fathers and with black men in general,
Mhm.
heterosexual black men, right?
Right.
That's always been a primary target of media and of this country in general. So when you look at commercials, when you look at TV shows, when you look at movies that cast that way, and understand that especially as it relates to commercials, these things aren't accidental. It's not as if there's this cattle call where H&M
Mhm.
says, hey, we need to cast couple, so send couple. The casting specs, the briefs, the casting specs that come in specifically say we want a black male lead and a white female lead. Those are intentional decisions. They're not. It's
Right.
not like those people just show up to the casting call
Oh
and they
yeah,
look at them and say, "Oh, they'd make a nice couple." It's all intentional.
I recently saw a casting call because I'm an actor and a
Yeah.
writer and all that as well. So I saw a casting call where they were looking for I think it was a light-skinned male, right? And he's supposed to be so professional and suave and all this and that. And they were looking for a light-skinned female, and she's supposed to be so intelligent and well presenting and so forth. But then they said they were looking for a brown skinned female to be kind of loud and obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I saw the racism in that because, I mean, why does the darker skinned sister have to be the loud, obnoxious one? Why can't
Right.
she be the intelligent, articulate one? So I see that. And myself as a screenwriter, I'm very intentional with what I write. I write for us. I write to represent us and to empower us and to heal us. And I catch some flack about it and I get dissed for it by some other black people because a lot of our people are fighting for a seat at the table instead of us trying to build our own table. I'm about us trying to build our own table. So I'm not really concerned with trying to fight to get to theirs because I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do to represent us and to honor the ancestors. And I don't feel like, and when I talk about interracial relationships, um, I'm not sitting around hating anybody. I'm not. And I get accused of that by other black people that I hate white people. First of all, as I've said on many occasions, it takes it takes energy to hate somebody. It takes a lot of energy to hate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not wasting that energy on Caucasians. My focus, my energy goes towards loving black people and wanting to see us healthy and whole and healed. That's what I'm about. And I feel as though if you say you're black and if you say you love your blackness, um, you can't really be out here just erasing it away. And a lot of these black folks today are
Yeah.
erasing. they're erasing the melanin out, and in another generation or whatever, um, their grandchildren will look anything like them. Their grandchildren will look
Yeah,
just
I mean,
totally white.
I think that when you mention people like Grace Jones and just bring it back to the commercials, I think that the bigger problem with TV, there's a couple of problems, but the bigger problem with the representation on TV is
Hmm.
that if you were to watch television, commercials or TV shows, you would believe that there was this mass movement of Black people interracially dating and marrying, right?
Right, but
Because
yeah,
the headlines are about the Serena Williamses of the world and so on and so forth. And every other commercial you turn on TV, it's a Black woman and a white man, a Black man and a white girl, yada
yeah,
yada.
because they're
But
trying
the
to make it
reality
seem
is
popular.
that's not what the reality of racial pair bonding statistics look like.
Right, because
you know,
most Black men are into Black women,
most
and
Black men
vice versa.
to the tune of I think the last thing I read was that
80
83%
something
of Black
percent, yes.
men are married to Black women and vice versa. But where
Right,
you do see a change, where you do see a shift, is when people start to earn above, I want to say it's 200, it might be 250, so don't quote me exactly on the number, but it's well into the six-figure
hmm,
income where you
right,
start to see a shift where people are
yes,
more likely to date interracially. So of course, you're going to see an overrepresentation of interracial relationships in celebrity pairings. But
right.
celebrity pairings, Black, white, or otherwise, have never
Hmm.
reflected the reality of what's going on in the world.
Right, but the thing is, how people get food. But see, the thing is, because they put that out there on the screen to glamorize it, how people get fooled by it and think that it's something popular to do. So a lot of our people will jump on that bandwagon, unfortunately.
Well,
Uh,
I think that a lot of people
well,
will
some of our
talk a
people,
good
not a lot.
game, and I think that what we have to I think that when we talk about it as a problem, like the way that I think it's important for us to look at these things is what do we
Right.
do about those realities. I
Hmm.
think the very first thing, and particularly with our children and with young people, is that one, they have to understand the game. They have to understand that when you look at these commercials aren't reflecting real life. These commercials are reflecting the choices, the very, very, very specific agenda choices of the brands and the companies that are bringing that to market. You know,
Right.
those are choices that they're making. But
Hmm.
also, we have to understand what role representation actually plays in our lives anyway. There's this idea, and we as a community have bought into it, that
Right.
somehow our fortunes as a people, our outcomes are made better by our representation on TV.
Right.
But we know that that can't really be true because one, we see certain segments like the segment of our community that marries interracially being overrepresented, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
that's red flag number one. But also we know that in the if we'll call it the golden age of Black representation on TV, which would have been
Hmm.
in the 80s and 90s when
Right.
you couldn't throw a stick at a television at any hour in prime time on any station and not see a Black family represented, whether it be the Cosby Show, Different World, Family Matters,
Right.
Living
You.
Single. I mean, we was all up in that, right?
Yeah.
But our outcomes, what was going on in the actual Black community during those times, wasn't better.
Right.
We
I.
we were dealing with high levels of teen pregnancy in the Black community. We were still dealing with mass incarceration. We were in the throes. We were literally in the throes of a mass incarceration epidemic that we didn't even recognize. While
Hmm.
shows like A Different World, Cosby Show, all those shows were on TV as the crime bill was being signed and all of those actions were being put into place.
The crime bills,
So,
huh?
so we have to understand that primetime media representation of Blackness is always illusory. It's never ever been our
Hmm.
path to liberation or some sort of ticket to betterment for the community. Is it nice when our little Black girls can see people on TV that look like them? Sure, maybe, but it hasn't proven to do much. Not when you look at the reality of data. You know, we're too busy celebrating. I think it was 2019 or maybe it was 2020, where all of the 4 or 5 major beauty queens were Black women.
Mm-hmm. I
Like,
remember that.
what kind of BS statistic is that to celebrate? I mean, it's, first of all, the fact that we would be celebrating beauty contests. I mean, you know, like who's the
Mm-hmm.
prettiest pony in the stable is
Right.
gross on its face, especially in a country that somehow thinks that feminism is important, which is a whole nother story. But the fact
Oh
that we
God.
would be celebrating that at all is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of that, when we look at what it takes to be one of those beauty queens, when we look at, if you line up all of those women's pictures,
Right.
you notice a very, very common thread. You notice that all of them have unattainable looks for most
Mm-hmm.
women in the world, let alone in the
Okay.
Black community, right?
Right.
So they're already unrealistic representations for our Black girls. So to say that, you know, it's so great that our daughters can see a Black beauty, how is that good? So there's just a brown face that makes her feel like she's not good enough? Then on top
Oh.
of that, all of those women, just like most of the women you see portrayed on TV and in commercials, all have very, what has come to be associated with Eurocentric facial features, either through cosmetic surgery or because that's just naturally the way that they're built.
Right.
All of them have thinner noses. All of them have, you know, have all of those sorts of facial features that have already been deemed more acceptable to whiteness.
Ugh. Yeah.
So it's
And true.
essentially
I,
a contest in blackface. You know, it's
that's wild. But I do think because I've experienced it myself, and like I said, I'm very intentional with what I put out there. Um, the arts are a very powerful tool in influencing and our people. That's why they have marketing and so forth. Because I did a production back in February before everything was shut down. It was a production of a play by a brother by the name of Keith Mason, I believe his name is, but it was called For Black Boys Who Considered Homicide When the Streets Were Too Much. Now it's a choreo poem type play, and the way that I directed it, which I was also in it, it had a very powerful message about letting Black men know how we're seen in this country,
mm-hmm.
and that we're seen as nothing more than a number. Uh, that they can just pick off at any time. And one of my fellow actors, he's an educator, and he brought some young Black boys to the show, who were like 11 or 12 years old, and they were really engaged in the show. And they were asked, because we do talkbacks, we do
Yeah.
talkbacks after every performance. So those young brothers were very engaged in the show, and they learned a lot about the prison, you know, the school, the prison pipeline, and so forth. So the show educated them, and it taught, you know, what was really going on in this world. And people were saying to me that you're touching the subjects that people don't want to touch. And you know, and that I'm not afraid to, um, because see, a lot of Black people that's in the art, when they create things, they're creating from a space of trying to gain white acceptance
Right.
or to be understood by white people. That's not how I write. I write to influence Black people to love us first, because our power is not in trying to gain white acceptance. Our power is in us, how we see us, how we feel about us. You know, so I know you said that you don't think that the representation makes a big difference because
Right.
things still going on, but I think that it can,
But
depending on how it's
what you're
presented.
describing isn't representation. What you're
Hmm.
describing is ownership of content.
Well,
You're describing directing the ship. That's
hmm,
very, very different than representation.
right, right.
The black representation in your work is incidental. What you're doing is
Well,
you are telling Black stories and you have a Black
hmm,
agenda. That's
yes,
not
I do.
representation. That's ownership. And Black
Yeah,
ownership of
you're
creative
right. You're
voices
right. You're right.
absolutely matters.
You're
Of
right.
course,
Yes.
that definitely matters. The problem is the conversation around representation isn't dealing with that. The conversation around representation says it's Black Girl Magic because Viola Davis got nominated for an Emmy for playing literally the worst black woman on TV. Like, that's what we get. That's what
Right,
representation.
right.
That's what representation tells us. That's not going to save us. But creative ownership of the ideas, creative ownership of not the representation, right? Because representation is akin to symbolism, right? Those
Mm-hmm.
black people that get heralded because they are furthering black representation. Understand what that means to whiteness and to media. That means that those are symbols. They are symbols.
Right.
They are emblems.
Mm-hmm.
And symbols don't save people, right?
Very true.
So it's not about representation because representation is always symbolic.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a change instrument. But creativity, black voices have always been a change instrument. The black arts have always been important. Whether it be the visual arts, the performing arts, the literary arts,
Of course, it depends on the black voice.
Thank you. So those things have always been important, but those things aren't
Right.
about representation because no one ever called Alvin Ailey representation.
Mm-hmm.
Because the representation was self-evident. It was inherent. There was nothing else. There was nothing else to be represented but us. So
Mm-hmm.
the conversation was about what were black people saying. No one called James Baldwin's work representation or Langston Hughes's work representation. This idea, this word representation, this is an invention of whiteness.
True. Very true.
So when I say it's not useful, that's what I'm talking about. But what you're describing, what you're doing, and there are others, that's not representation. You're not working towards greater representation. You said yourself, the representation self-evident. You're black. You write about black things. You write for black people. You're talking to black people. That's not representation.
You're right. Because I'm all about black empowerment, so I ain't even worried about that.
And we have to understand that more. And if we can understand that more as a people, then I believe a couple things happen. I think that first of all, when we get shoved these false narratives about our pair bonding habits, vis-a-vis commercials and television that push this idea of interracial coupling, then those things will be less effective because they won't register as severely because they won't be the only voices being heard. Right now, those things have a false amplification because they get an unfair share of culture because they're the only ones talking. And so it seems like they're more important. And because the people who are being represented, the actors, the writers, the directors of these Hollywood and television things, those people aren't talking about telling black stories from black perspectives. And like you said at the beginning of the discussion, excluding whiteness, right? Because that's a dirty word. To say that you want to be anti-white, I mean, there is no way to be pro-black or to be pro-marginalization and not be anti-white. You have to be against whiteness in order for those things to thrive. The pie is only this big, right? So if you want to get a bigger piece of that pie, who's it going to come from?
Right, because black people are the only ones who feel a need to say when we talk about being pro-black. We are the only ones who feel.
It's like even Tyler Perry, a whole billionaire with an airport that drives to his front door, still felt the need to say, "But I'm not anti." Like, this
pro-black. They love to say pro-black doesn't mean anti-white. Black people will say
the
that.
Hell it doesn't. Yes, it does. It very much means anti-white. If we're saying that white people have a stranglehold on 100% of the microphone and we want our share, where is it going to come from if not from whiteness?
Right. I mean, that makes me talk about reparations, right? Are you for? I'm not going to assume that. I'm sure you are, but I don't know if you are for sure. I mean, I think you might be for reparations.
I am, of course, for the concept and the idea of reparations. Do I think that is anything any black person alive today is going to see from the United States government? Absolutely not. I think that the reparations argument, for me personally, the greatest strength in the argument about reparations is as a filter for understanding who is and is not about Black liberation.
Right.
Because the Black people who don't want to have the reparations conversation, irrespective of whether or not you believe that it's possible, will happen, won't happen, but the people who don't want to have the conversation are the integrationists, right? Those are the
Exactly.
people who want to have a more comfortable existence on this plantation. Those are the people um, who think that brother that saved America down when the insurrection happened in the Capitol building, who think that brother was a good,
Look,
you know, those are the kinds of people who don't want to have a reparations conversation, because
I
those
believe,
kinds of people don't want to piss whiteness off.
yeah, I believe that whole thing was set up with their brother in the Capitol.
I mean, it was an
I,
obvious, it was, yeah, it
yeah,
was,
exactly.
yeah,
But yeah, a lot of our people want to keep white folks comfortable. Even when dealing with recently, we celebrated Martin Luther King Jr., right? But we only celebrate a certain part of Martin Luther King Jr., the part of Martin Luther King Jr. that he no longer was at the time of his death, the time he was murdered. He was no longer that I have a dream Martin. Okay. Now, that entire speech is 18 minutes long, but they only focus on one little section of that speech.
right.
The only thing they focus on in that speech is I have a dream that one day the little black boys and little black girls would join hands with little white boys and little white girls, to give the impression that's what he was about, just trying to bring us together with white folks and forget about being black. But that's not what he was about. He didn't
It's
even
not
write
what he
that.
was about at the
He,
time that he died, but it's also not what he was about even when he was fighting for integration. And to be sure, for the large swath of his career, he was an integrationist. That's probably the biggest criticism of Dr. King's legacy,
mm-hmm.
is his intent on integration. But you know,
But
we
not
all have
necessarily.
our
But not necessarily. He was for integration, but not necessarily to push black people into the physical arms of white people like
exactly, and
that.
that's, I mean,
Uh,
I think that's an important distinction. You know, Martin Luther King was, at his core, before he was anything else, he was a radical.
mm-hmm.
When you talk about the way that he utilized, you know, direct action, like bringing the fight to the enemy on the
Right.
streets, that for that, you know, we take for granted all this marching up and down the street, because now we don't go out here marching, we ain't even doing nothing anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, that was a radical thing to do, and
Yes.
to bring documentary journalists along with you to document it, to film it, to photograph it.
Mm-hmm.
That was radical thinking. The idea that he was talking about poverty, that he was speaking out against capitalism,
Right.
those were radical ideas. He was shooting daggers at the heart of what makes America America. And people don't
Mm-hmm.
like to talk about that aspect of it. And that part of Dr. King existed while he was an integrationist. So
Right.
even if we take issue with his integrationist politics, which I do, and I think we all should, because
Yeah.
our heroes aren't
But
perfect, and if we can't
mm-hmm.
criticize them, then we don't ever move past them.
but
But
black folks
even when
don't.
he was wrong about those things, even when he was on that failed mission, he still was a radical. He was still talking about very radical ideas and very radical things. And if we bring that back to the ideas of representation, Dr. King wouldn't have been with that. You know,
Right. Well.
Dr. King wouldn't have seen Hallie and Denzel as progress.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right. Well, see, he also began to regret integration. He
of
saw that it
course,
was a
yeah,
mistake. But a lot of black folks don't want to have that conversation about him saying, "I fear I've led my people into a burning house." He was talking about integration. He
yeah.
saw
And
that it was a mistake.
the black people that don't want to have that conversation, and unfortunately, you know, I commented like a month or two ago about the arts and how the arts were no longer revolutionary, and I do believe that that's true. It's not that there are no
Wow,
revolutionary
really?
artists. It's not that there are no revolutionary artists anymore, but because the art, in particular the black arts, have become so focused on the commerce of art, and like you were talking about before, the acceptance of the white mainstream, it has
Mm-hmm.
taken all of the revolutionary teeth out of art. Every time you get a like literally name any black artist and you talk
Right.
about their work, the minute that name gets to be well known, all of the teeth have been taken out of that work
Yeah.
because there's too well reinforced a machine and a method that whiteness
Hmm.
has for co-opting, for adopting, and then co-opting any kind of radical message that the arts might produce. And part of that is the generation of artists, what artists are being born into. This idea that this generation is so revolutionary because they march up and down the street and this whole Black Lives
Right.
Matters thing. That's a red herring, right? What that means is current culture has made the idea of resistance so
Hmm.
mainstream as to not even be resistance anymore.
I get that. You're a
There
deep
were there
brother.
were Pepsi
Right.
commercials about protests.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So
I
that
remember
means
that.
that this generation isn't more radical. This
Hmm.
generation might be pissed off like every young generation that came before it was pissed off about something, sure. But the reality of it is, and the arts are usually one of the primary areas where you can see this, is that the revolutionary teeth have been pulled out of this generation by mainstreaming things like revolutionary art.
Right. Well, my artistry still has the teeth in it.
Well, like I said, it's not to
but
say that there are no revolutionary
but
artists.
uh but of course some black folks want to yank them out because they're trying to protect their system. So I have other black artists that I know who would normally be supportive of me, but because I'm so outspoken about being pro-black, I don't always get that support anymore. I get totally shunned by some black folks because I boldly say I put black people first, um, and I'm not going to back down from that. So it is what it is. And as a little boy, I used to dream about growing up and winning an Oscar and all that kind of shit. But I don't even care about that anymore. If it happens, it happens. But I'm not looking for it because it's more important to me to put quality stuff out there that actually impacts our people, to get us to love us and to put us first. That's what I'm all about. I I I'm here for us. You know, that's a very
And I think that
important
that's
thing.
important. And when we talk about people who are in the arts, I think that to the extent content creators, whether they be artists, musicians, playwrights, actors, whatever, to the extent that they are willing to push the envelope and and understand what pushing the envelope means. Pushing the envelope no longer means playing roles on primetime television shows. That's not pushing the envelope.
Right.
Pushing the envelope means taking a stand that says, in essence, things like what you're saying, that says, you know what, I'm not going to take that role. I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z because it's more important for me to make sure that we aren't just represented, but that we are
Mhm.
owning the conversation about our experiences and our priorities. And in many, many ways, art gets to set priorities for the community because it
I
often
agree.
has this megaphone, right? The arts are a megaphone because say what you will about radicalism, say what you will about message and content and yada yada. When it all boils down to it, the reason that art is powerful is because art's entertaining and people like to be entertained, especially in a world that's literally going to hell in a handbasket the way that this one is.
Right.
So the biggest power to control conversations comes because art is entertaining, and we have lived in a reality where the entertainment value of art is tied to commerce, right?
Yes.
And we have been conditioned that commerce driving the bus means that
Hmm.
anything is permissible because of that. So it means that if you're an actor or an actress and you take a role in slave play, well, that's not your fault because our actors got to eat. We have to question
Oh
that
hell
as a,
no.
as a community, as
Right.
the consumer. We have to hold creatives accountable in those ways.
Hmm.
Um, our community does not do a very good job of holding anyone accountable because we don't hold ourselves accountable. So we have to look at that. So asking questions about representation mattering and blah blah blah. That's taking the easy way out, right? We like those
Hmm.
conversations because it doesn't cost us anything. It doesn't require anything of us to be
Right.
happy about Netflix launching a show with a black lead. That doesn't require anything of us.
Yeah.
But it does require something of us to say, you know what? It's not okay that Viola Davis played that role in The Help, or whatever, whatever help she was crying about.
Right.
How she regret. If and she says this now 15, 20 years after that movie came out. But if at the time that movie came out, we was like, nah, if we would have dated her then we wouldn't have to worry about this chick playing Nina Simone, because Zoe Saldana would never even dare try to play Nina Simone,
Right.
right?
Right.
But because we don't do that, because we don't have standards, because we don't have any racial self-respect as a people,
Yeah.
people get away with that, and it bleeds out into politics. It's the reason why Kamala Harris feels so comfortable telling bold-faced, stupid lies that are so easy to verify that she's lying, because she's not worried about backlash from the community.
Are you talking about her listening to Tupac before Tupac even came out, stuff like
That
that?
and her generational love of Kwanzaa and whatever, like
Oh
these
yeah.
these things, these people treat you. My mother always told me this: people treat you the way you teach them to treat you. And
Very true.
we have taught celebrities, we have taught media, and we have taught white people that we
Hmm.
can be treated any old kind of way, because we have bought into these nonsense ideas, like the fact that representation matters, like the fact that when we see ourselves on TV, that means that progress is being made. Putting
No.
a black person on TV is literally the
Right.
lowest hanging fruit. It literally just takes a casting call. It requires nothing of whiteness to do that. But
Well,
we then go in and over personify that to mean that progress is being made. It is the most low lack of self-esteem. Like we are the lowest self-esteem, kid in high school on the racial spectrum.
yeah. There's a lot of self-hatred in our people, unfortunately, because we don't know of our true history and our true greatness. And I want to say thank you to the person who keep pushing. I'm definitely going to keep pushing because I've never been a quitter, never been a crowd follower. The fact that a lot of our people have turned their back on me because I'm so outspoken about being pro-black and I focus my work on us. Uh, you know, it bothers me a little bit because some of these people I thought were friends, but I quickly get over that, because I'm still going to do what I'm supposed to do for us, regardless. So it is what it is. I'm not going to give up on us. We come first, period. It doesn't matter who turns their back on me because of it. I'm going to keep going. And our people are stuck on a lot of symbolism, as you were talking about. Like, all you got to do is give a little pretty speech, say some pretty words, and we fall for it. You know, like what Joe Biden was saying at his inauguration speech and so forth. And you know, I'm like, yeah, those are just another pretty speech. You know what I'm saying? Like when President Obama became president the first time, and I voted for him first. I voted for him both times. You know,
As did I.
and I was one of the people out there saying, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. But no, we didn't. No, we didn't. We didn't do shit. And then you have black people that say, well, we can't expect him to be black people's president. He's everybody's president. But don't you know that, let's say, for instance, I'm sure you've heard of Marco Rubio and people like that. Okay. Let's say if he were to become president, uh, the Latino community would definitely expect for him to do something specifically for them. They would, and they would hold him accountable. Now, President Obama, he made sure that European Jews got more reparations on top of the reparations that they already get. And their Holocaust didn't even happen in this country. Their Holocaust didn't even happen in this country, and they got money from this country. And he made sure that they got more money. Our Holocaust happened in this country, and it's still happening in this country. And even Martin Luther King, we were talking about earlier, he was fighting for reparations at the time he was murdered. Um, I'm sure you've seen that video before with him talking, and he's talking about how they gave reparations to everybody,
Yep.
including white peasants and so forth. and they expect us to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. And he said we're going to DC to get our check and stuff
Hmm.
like that. And in his very last speech, because he was fed up, in his very last speech, he was basically telling black people, to take your money. He said, take your money out of the white-owned banks and put your money into black-owned banks, which I'm sure the white folks that were listening to that did not like him saying that.
No, of course
Okay,
not.
and so the next day he was dead. Um, but the black folks who want to keep the plantation comfortable won't address that. They just want to keep talking about I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream. And he didn't even believe in that quote unquote dream anymore. Um, he saw that it was becoming a nightmare. That's why he said, I feared I've led my people into a burning house.
I mean, the,
It,
the the comeback to the "I Have a Dream" speech is that there is no greater nightmare than getting shot dead.
right.
For his
Exactly.
people. He might have
Exactly.
had a dream, but he lived a nightmare.
Yeah, he did. Most definitely.
Yeah,
Um, this has been a great conversation, definitely. So
absolutely.
you
I appreciate it.
you um you did journalism before. You wrote for a paper.
Yeah, I actually began my career in newspaper journalism. I
Okay.
wrote a column and I did feature stories covering like youth culture and the arts and that kind of thing.
Oh wow,
Did interviews
cool.
with people like Tommy Hilfiger and stuff like that.
Oh him.
Yeah,
Well, there's a rumor about him, right? That he don't really like black people and so forth. I don't know if
I,
that's true,
I, I I've
but
I've heard that rumor. His brother. The reason I met him is that his brother was a school teacher in upstate New York,
mhm.
and he hosted a fashion show for a predominantly black school in upstate New York. Is how I came to interview him.
Okay, cool.
But the thing is, what
You-
those kinds of rumors have less weight when you take the position that
mhm.
whether or not they overtly or expressly demonstrate a disdain for black people, we know that none of them are on our side. We have
Right,
no friends.
right.
We have no friends. So whether or not Timberland or Tommy Hilfiger or whatever one said this, that, or
Or
the third,
Gucci, yeah,
it doesn't. At the end of the day, those things don't matter as much when you take the position that we have no friends. All of them are
right.
against us. Every single one of those brands, every single one of those outlets, they're always going to be anti-black. So
Hmm.
the question is less about arguing over what some famous person or famous brand did or didn't say or do or think,
Right.
and more about what are we doing in response to the overall anti-blackness that we know for a fact, without debate, we know for a fact exists in this system and every
Yes.
single aspect that comes out of this system. And if we start there, then I think that we get bogged down less worrying
Hmm.
about who said what famous person doesn't like us this week, who we canceling that week, which, I mean, in the history of canceling people, black people ain't canceled nobody. Only people that cancel anyone is
Well,
white people.
well, well.
They're the only ones who
Yeah,
cancel people.
we cancel black people.
We don't even cancel black people. We cancel the
Well,
black people that white people tell us to cancel. That's what we cancel.
okay, because like
Because
even
because because we didn't cancel Bill Cosby till white people told us to. We didn't cancel R. Kelly till white people told us to.
well, I
We
still haven't
don't
canceled Bill
we don't
Cosby.
cancel we don't cancel in the black community. We wait for white people to give us our marching orders and then we cancel. Which
Well,
is
so
again gets back to our collective lack of self-esteem.
so some black people have canceled Chrisette Michelle, right? Uh,
Right, but that's
but,
because white liberals said that needed to happen because she
hmm
supported Trump, and white liberals said,
she
"Nah, we're not
she
having that."
she actually didn't support him though.
No, but that's how it was interpreted. What
Yeah,
she actually did doesn't matter. What matters is
right.
how it was interpreted. But my point being is
And,
we don't have the power. We create culture, but we don't understand it
mhm,
enough to weaponize it or utilize it. White people do that, and
right.
that's why we keep losing because we don't. We just keep creating culture, and we don't actually weaponize it and utilize it.
Yeah, we're
And we gotta learn.
very
We have to learn those lessons. We have to learn
white
those
people.
lessons.
Yeah, white people are very
Yes.
strategic, and we just believe whatever they tell us. We don't question it. Um, we're up in court saying I forgive you to some racist that kills our brother in cold blood.
And ain't
You
even
got
asked for forgiveness.
you got the black judge hugging the white woman and giving her a Bible, and
Yep.
you got the black female bailiff playing in the white woman's hair. I don't know what the hell that was about. You know what I'm talking about? That Amber Geiger trial,
Yep.
stuff like that. That was totally disgusting to watch. That kind of thing. It was very disgusting to watch that. You know, very much so. And and it's just a lot going on.
Yep.
There was something I meant to say, but I forgot it that quick. But this has been a really great conversation, though. I
Definitely, I've
really
enjoyed it.
enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me.
Enlightening
I really
conversation.
appreciate it.
I mean, I definitely want to have you back since he was a child. Okay. Oh, is that about R. Kelly? Somebody said since he was a child.
I'm
Uh,
not sure what that's a reference to.
oh, wow. I don't know either. But as far as R. Kelly, I'm not really gonna get into him
Yeah,
about
that's it.
that.
That's a
It,
whole nother.
but as far as Bill Cosby, that's a long story too. But
Yep.
I have not canceled him. I haven't because I feel like a lot of that was a setup. Um, you know, you have this abundance of mostly white women coming out of the woodwork after 20, 30 years, 40 years and accusing him of stuff. And of course, they would always throw one or two black women in the mix to make it seem more, um, you know, make it seem more convincing. Um, but that,
Yeah, I
that,
mean, I
that kind
think,
of,
like I said, I don't want to get into the whole Cosby thing. I don't, I mean,
right.
as far as I'm concerned, to hell with Bill Cosby because Bill Cosby was hating on black people since for forever. He was a
You think he
respectability
was,
Negro. He was king of the respectability Negroes.
you think he
So
was hating on black people?
I don't have a whole lot of love for Bill Cosby
I
as
understand,
an
but do
icon.
you really think he was hating on black people?
He
He just went
was.
about it. He just went about it
He
the wrong way, trying to
I mean,
get.
wordsmith it however you want, but at the end of the day, the
I'm
result is the
not
same.
trying to be a
He
wordsmith.
was hating on
Why
him.
not come with me like that? I'm not trying to be a wordsmith. I'm just saying
No, but that was
that
Bill
I
Cosby. Bill Cosby represented. Bill Cosby represented. He represented what a lot of um, what a lot of black celebrities, what a lot of black wealthy elites, what a lot of black academic and intellectual elites do to the rank and file black community, which is they forget where they came from, they get where they're going, and then they turn around and want to point the finger. Bill Cosby never, ever, ever had anything to say about white supremacy.
no, he
Bill
didn't.
Cosby directed all of
He
his ire to black people not pulling their pants up.
he. I mean, I saw old clips
So
of him.
to hell with Bill
I
Cosby.
I saw
To
old
hell
clips
with
of
Bill
him when he
Cosby.
was.
It can
I,
be Bill Cosby can be an example of the way that black men are disproportionately targeted and treated by white supremacy for the same crimes that white men commit, and also not be shit. Like he can be both of
right.
those
I mean,
things. He can be both of those things.
I saw old clips of him when he was younger, where he was acting like he was trying to educate black people on our history in Africa and so forth.
I mean,
And it,
yeah.
you know,
But the Bill Cosby we talking about, the Bill Cosby we talking about
so you're
was
saying he
very, very
changed.
clear and very, very
Hmm.
specific about his disdain for black people, in particular, poor and less educated black people. He hated those kinds of black people,
I
and he
never really
didn't make that a
heard.
secret. He
I
didn't
never
make
really,
that a secret.
well, I never really heard those speeches that people were saying that he gave um
Oh,
against black people.
I grew up on those
I,
albums. I heard them.
I
But anyway, like you said,
well,
that's a conversation for another time.
yeah, I just want them to throw that old white woman in jail who 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 uh who lied on Emmett Till.
Yeah.
I heard she's still alive, and she waited all these years, like a couple of years ago, to admit that she lied, which we already knew anyway. But she lied on him when she said that he whistled at her and was trying to flirt with her.
Mm-hmm.
She admitted that it was a lie, and I think she should be thrown in jail for that, honestly, because in my book she's a murderer because it was her lie that led to him being brutalized. And her lie led to him being Emmett Till. Her lie led to Emmett Till being
I mean,
brutalized and
it
murdered.
definitely did. But if
So,
but the reality of that situation, just I mean, to wrap up, it's true. I mean, it was decided that she was too old to stand prosecution. But the reality of it is, in this country and
that's a
also in
joke.
our community.
That's a joke in itself because if she were black, they wouldn't give a fuck about how old she is.
Well,
They wouldn't care
well,
about
the
it.
thing is, no. If she were a black woman who had done that, I think the outcome would have been the same because we don't prosecute proxy violence in this country, and we don't
Right.
hold proxy violence. You know, people who are guilty of proxy crimes, we don't actually hold
Mm-hmm.
them accountable. It's the reason why. Is the reason why black male vulnerability is such a big topic because no one says anything about the black girlfriend or wife or sister or
You know
mother
what?
who starts, you know, the brother that was killed outside that Walmart a couple of years ago,
What,
defending the
what,
honor of his wife who was talking smack. But we don't talk about those sorts of things, and those
what,
are
what
proxy crimes.
what I'm saying is, if a black woman had lied on a whiteboard about something, and her lie led to him being beaten down,
Well, I mean,
do
it would
you
have
think?
got that far, right? Because nobody would have, no one would have, no white man would have died over the word of no black woman. That wouldn't have happened in this country.
Yes, it would have. Maybe a black person would have got him. But anyway, well, you know what I'm saying. It could happen. It could happen. I
Maybe.
think it can happen. Maybe. What that person that writing? Oh, that's still up there. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I think it's been like an hour. Hasn't it been an hour or something now?
It has.
It's
I
been
think
really.
we're probably a little bit over, but yeah,
Oh,
time flies when you're having a good conversation.
well, it's definitely been a good conversation, and I definitely would like to invite you back again at some point
Of
if
course,
you want to come back.
I would be
All
happy
right.
to. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Cool. Thank you so much
All
for
right.
being here. All right, man.
Have a
All
good
right.
one.
All right. You too. Bye bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye. All right, people. I'll see you next time on the C Note on February the 10th, when my guest will be Content Johnson. Content Johnson is a singer. She's a recording artist, an educator, and a producer. So I'll see you then next time, episode 9 of the C Note on February the 10th. Bye now.